I hope the sheriff doesn't want to talk to you, Gran said, shaking her head as if indicating no would make it less likely. What? Jason was turning red, looking defensive. You see Maudette in the store all the time when you get your gas. You, so to speak, date her. Then she winds up dead in an apartment you're familiar with? I summarized. It wasn't much, but it was something, and there were so few mysterious homicides in Bontemps that I thought every stone would be turned in its investigation. I ain't the only one who fills the bill. Plenty of other guys get their gas there, and all of them know Maudette. Yeah, but in what sense? Gran asked bluntly. She wasn't a prostitute, was she? So she will have talked about who she saw. She just liked to have a good time. She wasn't a pro. It was good of Jason to defend Maudette, considering what I knew of his selfish character. I began to think a little better of my big brother. She was kind of lonely, I guess, he added. Jason looked at both of us then, and saw we were surprised and touched. Speaking of prostitutes, he said hastily, there's one in Monroe specializes in vampires. She keeps a guy standing by with a stake in case one gets carried away. She drinks synthetic blood to keep her blood supply up. That was a pretty definite change of subject, so Grin and I tried to think of a question we could ask without being indecent. Wonder how much she charges, I ventured, and when Jason told us the figure he'd heard, we both gasped. Once we got off the topic of Maudette's murder, lunch went about as usual, with Jason looking at his watch and exclaiming that he had to leave just when it was time to do the dishes. But Gran's mind was still running on vampires, I found out. She came into my room later when I was putting on my makeup to go to work. How old do you reckon the vampire is, the one you met? I have no idea, Gran. I was putting on my mascara, looking wide-eyed and trying to hold still so I wouldn't poke myself in the eye, so my voice came out funny, as if I was trying out for a horror movie. Do you suppose he might remember the war? I didn't need to ask which war. After all, Gran was a charter member of the Descendants of the Glorious Dead. Could be, I said, turning my face from side to side to make sure my blush was even. You think he might come to talk to us about it? We could have a special meeting. At night, I reminded her. Oh, yes, it'd have to be. The Descendants usually met at noon at the library and bought a bag lunch. I thought about it. It would be plain rude to suggest to the vampire that he ought to speak to Gran's club because I'd saved his blood from drainers, but maybe he would offer if I gave him a little hint. I didn't like to, but I'd do it for Gran. I'll ask him the next time he comes in, I promised. At least he could come talk to me, and maybe I could tape his recollections, Gran said. I could hear her mind clicking as she thought of what a coup that would be for her. It would be so interesting to the other club members, she said piously. I stifled an impulse to laugh. I'll suggest it to him, I said. We'll see. When I left, Gran was clearly counting her chickens. I hadn't thought of Renee Lanier going to Sam with the story of the parking lot fight. Renee'd been a busy bee, though. When I got to work that afternoon, I assumed the agitation I felt in the air was due to Maudette's murder. I found out different. Sam hustled me into the storeroom the minute I came in. He was hopping with anger. He reamed me up one side and down the other. Sam had never been mad at me before, and soon I was on the edge of tears. And if you think a customer isn't safe, you tell me and I'll deal with it, not you, he was saying for the 6th time when I finally realized that Sam had been scared for me. I caught that rolling off him before I clamped down firmly on hearing Sam. Listening into your boss led to disaster. It had never occurred to me to ask Sam, or anyone else, for help. And if you think someone is being harmed in our parking lot, your next move is to call the police, not step out there yourself like a vigilante, Sam huffed. His fair complexion, always ruddy, was redder than ever, and his wiry golden hair looked as if he hadn't combed it. Okay, I said, trying to keep my voice even and my eyes wide open so the tears wouldn't roll out. Are you going to fire me? No, he exclaimed, apparently even angrier. I don't want to lose you. He gripped my shoulders and gave me a little shake. Then he stood looking at me with wide, crackling blue eyes, and I felt a surge of heat rushing out from him. Touching accelerates my disability, makes it imperative that I hear the person touching. I stared right into his eyes for a long moment, then I remembered myself and I jumped back as his hands dropped away. I whirled and left the storeroom, spooked. I learned a couple of disconcerting things. Sam desired me, and I couldn't hear his thoughts as clearly as I could other people's. I'd had waves of impressions of how he was feeling, but not thoughts. More like wearing a mood ring than getting a fax. So what do I do about either piece of information? Absolutely nothing. I'd never looked on Sam as a bettable man before, or at least not bettable by me, for a lot of reasons. But the simplest one was that I never looked at anyone that way. Not because I don't have hormones. Boy, do I have hormones. But they're constantly tamped down because sex, for me, is a disaster. Can you imagine knowing everything your sex partner is thinking? Right. Along the order of, gosh, look at that mole. Her butt's a little big. Wish she'd move to the right a little. Why doesn't she take the hint and... ... You get the idea. It's chilling to the emotions, believe me. And during sex, there is simply no way to keep a mental guard up. Another reason is that I like Sam for a boss, and I like my job, which gets me out and keeps me active in earning so I won't turn into the recluse my grandmother fears I'll become. Working in an office is hard for me, and college was simply impossible because of the grim concentration necessary. It just drained me. So right now, I wanted to mull over the rush of desire I'd felt from him. It wasn't like he'd made me a verbal proposition or throw me down on the storeroom floor. I'd felt his feelings, and I could ignore them if I chose. I appreciated the delicacy of this, and wondered if Sam had touched me on purpose, if he actually knew what I was. I took care not to be alone with him, but I have to admit, I was pretty shaken that night. The next two nights were better. We fell back into our comfortable relationship. I was relieved. I was disappointed. I was also run off my feet since Maudette's murder sparked a business boom at Merlotte's. All sorts of rumors were buzzing around Bontemps, and the Shreveport news team did a little piece on Maudette Pakin's grisly death. Though I didn't attend her funeral, my grandmother did, and she said the church was jam-packed. Poor lumpy Maudette, with her bitten thighs, was more interesting in death than she'd ever been in life. I was about to have 2 days off, and I was worried I'd miss connecting with the vampire Bill. I needed to relay my grandmother's request. He hadn't returned to the bar, and I began to wonder if he would. Mac and Denise hadn't been back in Merlotte's either, but Renee Lenier and Hoyt Fortenberry made sure I knew they'd threatened them with horrible things. I can't say I was seriously alarmed. Criminal trash like the rats roam the highways and trailer parks of America, not smart enough or moral enough to settle down to productive living. They never made a positive mark on the world or amounted to a hill of beans, to my way of thinking. I shrugged off Renee's warnings, but he sure enjoyed relaying them. Renee Lenier was small like Sam, but where Sam was ruddy and blonde, Renee was swarthy and had a bushy head full of rough black hair threaded with gray. Renee often came by the bar to drink a beer and visit with Arlene because, as he was fond of telling everyone in the bar, she was his favorite ex-wife. He had 3. Hoyt Fortenberry was more of a cipher than Renee. He was neither dark nor fair, neither big nor little. He always seemed cheerful and always tipped decent. He admired my brother Jason far beyond what Jason deserved in my opinion. I was glad Renee and Hoyt weren't there the night the vampire returned. He sat at the same table. Now that the vampire was actually in front of me, I felt a little shy. I found I'd forgotten the almost imperceptible glow of his skin. I'd exaggerated his height and the clear-cut lines of his mouth. "What can I get you?" I asked. He looked up at me. I had forgotten, too, the depth of his eyes. He didn't smile or blink. He was so immobile. For the second time, I relaxed into his silence. When I let down my guard, I could feel my face relax. It was as good as getting a massage, I'm guessing. "What are you?" he asked me. It was the second time he'd wanted to know. "I'm a waitress," I said again, deliberately misunderstanding him. That's it for the night, guys. But do me a favor, if you actually listen to the end of it, I don't think anyone does, but if you do, comment, I don't know, a ear emoji in the comments. Please and thank you, I guess. Thank you for listening.